I shouldn't even be recording this. Every part of me is screaming to just shut up, delete this file, and pretend I never saw what I saw. But I can't. If this video disappears after you watch it, you'll know why. You've seen stories like this before, grainy tapes, corrupted DVDs, lost episodes, whispered about in forums at 3 in the morning. But I promise you, this one isn't like those. This isn't the kind of thing people joke about online. This feels different. Wrong. Like something I was never meant to stumble across, something that should have stayed buried. Even now, I can't stop replaying the images in my head. I've tried drinking, I've tried drowning myself in noise, but silence always creeps back in, and with it, the episode. It's not just disturbing in the usual sense, not like the gore-filled, cheap scare edits you've probably seen floating around. No. This was subtler. Meaner. Almost alive. I know how that sounds, but if you stick with me, you'll understand. There's one scene in particular I almost couldn't watch. I had to look away, actually look away, and even then, it felt like the images followed me into the dark behind my eyelids. But I'll get to that. For now, just know this, what I found was never meant for kids. Hell, it wasn't meant for anyone. The more I think about it, the more I wonder if I wasn't supposed to find it at all. Like maybe I wasn't the viewer, but the target. And if you're listening to this now, maybe you are too. It started in the most ordinary way possible. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just me wasting a Saturday digging through a stack of old DVDs at a thrift store. The air smelled like dust and fabric softener, the kind of place where forgotten toys and scratched CDs go to die. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just chasing that little hit of nostalgia you get when you stumble on something from your childhood. And then I saw it. Wedged between a cracked copy of Shrek 2 and a blank karaoke disc was a slim, black case. No cover art, no label, just a faint, uneven strip of masking tape across the front. Scrawled in fading ink, almost illegible, was one word, SpongeBob. Instantly, it pulled me back. Back to Saturday mornings on the living room carpet, cereal bowl balanced on my knees, laughing at dumb jokes only a kid could find genius. I hadn't thought about those days in years, but suddenly the idea of finding some lost special or bonus feature felt too good to pass up. I should have left it there. The clerk barely looked at me when I paid, 50 cents, tossed into a chipped mug. I remember feeling stupidly excited, like I'd uncovered some forgotten treasure, a piece of childhood sealed away and waiting for me. I thought I was about to relive something innocent. I thought it was just a forgotten special. I was dead wrong. The disc itself looked like it had lived 3 separate lifetimes. Deep scratches crisscrossed the reflective surface, like someone had tried, unsuccessfully, to erase it by hand. The black case rattled when I shook it, and inside, a sliver of paper was folded tight. At first, I thought it was just a receipt, but it was nothing more than a ripped scrap of notebook paper with a string of numbers scribbled across it, for 23 to 1106. No explanation. No context. Just, timestamps. I told myself it didn't matter. Probably some old recording, a half-taped special, something mundane. Still, when I slid the disc into my player, I felt my chest tighten in a way I couldn't explain. The screen went black for longer than it should have, like the player was struggling to read what I'd fed it. And then, familiarity. The SpongeBob theme. Only, not quite. At first glance, it was the same cheerful jingle burned into every millennial brain, but the colors looked washed out, as if I were watching through dirty glass. The ocean blue of the opening shot had turned dull, closer to gray. The music dragged, just slightly slowed, like a warped cassette. SpongeBob's iconic laugh still rang out, but higher in pitch, stretched thin and reedy, like it was being forced through a throat not made for laughter. I kept telling myself it was just old tape degradation. That's all. Nothing sinister. But every frame felt heavier, like a parody of itself,
something mimicking the bright cheer I remembered without ever really capturing it. When the title card finally flashed, the edges of the letters seemed too sharp, outlined in a deep red that had no place in the palette I knew. The background music cut off half a beat too soon, leaving a jarring silence that pressed into the room. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart pounding harder than it should have for a kid's cartoon. Because deep down, I already knew something was wrong. And the intro? That was only the beginning. What came next felt like it was never meant for kids. Or anyone at all. The episode itself opened like any other, SpongeBob at the Krusty Krab, flipping patties with that exaggerated grin plastered across his face. The colors seemed a little flat, but it was still recognizably SpongeBob. For the first few minutes, I actually relaxed. Maybe it really was just some half-finished special, a test reel that never made it to air. SpongeBob hummed as he worked, his spatula clinking against the grill in a rhythm that almost felt too sharp, too metallic. Squidward appeared behind the register, looking his usual miserable self, and for a moment I caught myself smiling. It was comforting, in a way. Like slipping into a memory. But then I noticed the pauses. When SpongeBob asked Squidward how his morning was, Squidward just stared at him. Not annoyed. Not sarcastic. Just stared. For a full 5 seconds, his face frozen in a grimace that never quite blinked. When he finally answered, his voice dragged, like the audio was stretched too thin. Oh, just wonderful. I told myself it was a glitch. Old media gets corrupted. Simple. But then SpongeBob leaned closer to him, his smile twitching at the corners, and muttered something I swear I'd never heard in any episode before. Do you hear it too, Squidward? The words were soft, almost drowned out by the background hum, but they landed like a stone in my stomach. Squidward didn't answer. He just looked away, and the scene continued as if nothing happened. The laughter track chimed in a few beats late, awkwardly out of sync with the action. It wasn't the bubbly, canned laughter you'd expect either, it sounded hollow, tinny, and ended too abruptly, as though someone had cut the file mid-playback. Patrick showed up next, barging into the restaurant, shouting his usual nonsense. Except his voice wavered, dipping into a deeper register at the end of each line, like two recordings layered imperfectly together. When he laughed, it sounded forced, like someone pretending to laugh without remembering how. At first, I thought it was some weird animator's joke, like an intern messing around and adding Easter eggs. Maybe something that slipped through quality control. But the longer I watched, the less funny it felt. Every frame seemed to linger a little too long, every smile stretched just past natural. The characters weren't acting, they were waiting. And beneath the surface cheer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was listening. Something outside the cartoon, using it as a mask. The longer I watched, the less it resembled anything I'd call a cartoon. The colors seemed to drain scene by scene, as if the saturation slider was being dragged down in real time. The walls of the Krusty Krab dulled from bright teal to a bruised gray, and the cheery nautical decor faded into the background like rotting wallpaper. Squidward, who usually thrived on his sarcastic little barbs, stopped speaking altogether. He just slumped behind the register, his head tilted low, his eyes ringed in dark shadows that I knew weren't part of the usual design. Every so often, the camera held on him for just a second too long. His chest rose and fell heavily, almost like he was sighing, though no sound came out. SpongeBob, on the other hand, didn't lose energy, he gained it. His movements grew sharper, more jittery, his laugh cracking into shrill bursts that didn't match his mouth. And then came the moment that made my skin crawl. He looked at the camera. Not a quick wink, not a fourth wall gag. His head snapped toward the screen, eyes unblinking, grin stiff. He held it for a full, unbearable 10 seconds. The background noise dulled to a faint hum, like static pressed into silence. I know what you're thinking. You're probably rolling your eyes, muttering something about the old, Squidward suicide, creepypasta. I thought the same thing. But trust me, this wasn't that. This wasn't exaggerated gore or over-the-top shock value. This was quieter. Hungrier. Someone wanted us to see this. I could feel it in every lingering shot, every warped laugh track, every stretch of silence that should have been filled with cartoon antics. It was as if the episode was built to wear me down, to erode that nostalgic comfort until only unease was left. There was one frame, just one, that almost made me turn the whole thing off. I'll spare you the full image for now, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. All I'll say is that it involved Squidward's face twisted into something that didn't belong in a kid's show, something too human to be drawn. I couldn't stop watching. Even as my stomach tightened, even as every instinct told me to eject the disc and break it in half, I sat frozen. Because I had to know what came next. And what came next was worse. That was when the show stopped pretending. The next scene opened with SpongeBob standing alone in the middle of an empty street. No background music, no bustle of Bikini Bottom, just silence. His body twitched in faint, stuttering movements, as if the frames were missing in between. For a moment he just stood there, frozen in place, until his eyes snapped wide and his mouth opened. "Why are you watching this?" The words weren't pitched in his usual chipper voice. They were lower, strained, like a throat-rub drawl. The audio crackled, breaking into bursts of static, but I heard it clearly enough. I froze. The screen glitched, skipping back half a second, then replaying the same line again, "Why are you watching this?" Each repetition warped further, vowels stretching, consonants cutting like metal on glass. I wanted to stop it. God, I wanted to. But my hand hovered uselessly over the remote. It was like the moment you realize a nightmare is too vivid to wake from. You know you're trapped, but you can't look away. And then SpongeBob laughed. Not his laugh. Not even close. It was guttural, shaking, broken into loops that cut in and out like a corrupted file. His pupils shrank to pinpricks, and though his mouth never moved, I heard him again, softer this time, "You shouldn't be here." The screen flickered black for a fraction of a second. My own reflection flashed back at me in the dark glass, pale and tense. Then the episode returned, as if nothing had happened, characters walking, talking, resuming their empty roles. But I couldn't shake it. I almost didn't want to tell you this part, because once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Once you know the show saw you, noticed you, it follows you around like a shadow. Even now, the echo of that voice still crawls under my skin, like he's waiting for me to hit play again. And I did. I kept watching. Because whatever this was, whatever forbidden thing I'd stumbled into, it wasn't finished with me yet. 8. Aftermath and Conspiracy, 400 words. Summary. Narrator researches origins of the tape. Finds forum posts hinting at test screenings, banned footage, employees who went missing. Maybe reference Nickelodeon intern scandals, meta tie-in to real world. Escalates from personal experience broader conspiracy. FOMO and hooks. Drop subtle breadcrumbs, one user mentioned an even darker cut that no one has survived watching. Directly ask viewers to comment with theories, have you heard of anything like this? I wish I could say I got rid of it. That I smashed the disc into shards and buried the pieces somewhere they'd never be found. But the truth is uglier. The tape, if you can even call it that, never stays gone. I've deleted the file from my hard drive more than once, only to find it sitting neatly in my downloads folder the next morning, waiting. Sometimes the timestamp on it is earlier than when I went to bed, as if it had been there all along. I tell myself I shouldn't keep watching. Every time I hit play, I feel it digging deeper, like it's rewriting something inside me. But something tells me it's not finished with me yet. And maybe it won't ever be. So I'm leaving this here. A warning, if nothing else. If you ever stumble across an unmarked SpongeBob episode, whether it's on a disc, a USB, or tucked in the corner of some forgotten forum, don't watch it. Don't even touch it. Or maybe, it won't matter. Maybe it'll find you first.